Welcome to the people of Penn State. Each week on the podcast, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about, and you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State network. Well, today we are joined by Tim Buckley. Tim is a meteorologist covering all types of weather in North Carolina. He's covered snow, tornadoes, snow just yesterday in North Carolina, tornadoes, floods, and multiple hurricanes across the state, from Matthew to Florence to Sandy and now Helene. He's received awards and recognition for his coverage and has been nominated for 10 regional EMMY awards. Tim is a 2009 graduate of Penn State's Earth and Mineral Science College, and he has a meteorology degree. While in school, he was also a member of the Penn State Blue Band. His passions include weather, communication, food, and football. We're going to get into all of that in just a minute with Tim. But Tim, welcome to the people of Penn State.
Thanks, Paul, for having me. Really happy to be here and chat all things Nittany Lions here from North Carolina. It's great.
Yeah, well, let's start right at the very beginning. How did you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
Sure. So for me, I grew up in upstate New York. We call it Central New York, but if you're familiar with Syracuse, my hometown is a little bit north of there. So I didn't really grow up in the heart of Penn State country at all. But for me, growing up, I had a fascination with weather. If y'all watch the news at all in recent months, in the following months too, you're going to see a lot about lake effect snow. They had a big snow game in Buffalo, and places that get 4 or 5 feet of snow in the course of a week sometimes. That's kind of where I grew up. So I was just keyed in and tuned in to weather at a pretty young age. And if you're someone that's interested in weather and you start looking at colleges around the country, you find out a couple things. Number one, you find out a lot of your normal colleges don't offer a meteorology program or a meteorology degree. I actually grew up a Syracuse fan and wanted to go there. They didn't have a meteorology program. So for me, I was out looking around to see, okay, where else could my options be? And Penn State is right at the top. So one of the better programs that you can find, particularly if you want to go into the TV business or in the communication side of things. So it was one of my choices. I went and toured around at a bunch of different schools, Cornell and Miami. I thought I would want to be there with palm trees, but eventually made the right choice and picked Penn State for sure. So that's kind of how I ended up there in a roundabout way, but it wasn't something like it runs in the family, or honestly, it wasn't really on my radar until I kind of dug into the details of what would be good for my career path. And it was a great choice. Best choice that I made.
Yeah, it's really interesting that there are only about like a half dozen really solid meteorology programs in the country, right? When you think about Penn State, you mentioned Miami, I know Mississippi State, I know University of Washington. When you're looking at the bios of meteorologists, right, they've gone to one of those schools, and Penn State is certainly on top of that list.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah, I would say you almost have like these regional hubs of sorts. So like for the Northeast, Penn State is definitely that regional meteorological power. And it has one of the older programs and a lot of that pioneering research into weather forecasting. And you can find some really cool black and white pictures over at the Walker Building. And they have a little bit of history on the program there of like the first weather broadcasts in the state and those types of things. But around the country, kind of the big dogs are Oklahoma. If you want to, research tornadoes, obviously that's the place to be. Miami for hurricanes. NC State's pretty good down here where I am as well. But yeah, it's kind of a niche field, right? So everybody has education or biology or, we these bigger fields or business, but it's kind of harder to find those meteorology programs.
I just got a cold chill up my spine. You mentioned, we mentioned off air, I lived in Greenville, North Carolina for 10 years, and you mentioned NC State. So all of a sudden I can hear the wolves howling, and I could see people doing their NC State, whatever that is. But
yeah, they do the wolf pack symbol.
Exactly. Big rival of East Carolina at the time I was down there. But you're certainly right. I mean, certainly one of the leaders in this space in terms of the work that you do. I would also imagine, though, that part of the draw to Penn State was some of the extracurricular activities. I mentioned in your intro, you're involved in the Blue Band, right? I mean, the combination of like the academic program and the opportunity to march through that tunnel in Beaver Stadium probably also had a big influence on your decision.
Yeah, it definitely did. And just to kind of add some context to that choice, so I was in high school from, well, I graduated in 05. So I guess I was in high school from 2002 to 2005, which were hardly banner years for our Penn State football program, right? These are years that we're not going to really talk about too much again, but it wasn't really on my radar of like, wow, I want to be there. Like I said, I didn't grow up as a fan of the school, and it wasn't really one of the top programs at the time. Miami was, and all these other places. But what really sold me on it, honestly, Paul, was when I think it was 2004. I guess it was my senior year. I have a cousin and her family. They live in Scranton, the Clark Summit area, and they invited me that fall. They said, we're going to go to a Penn State football game. My cousin was probably going to go to Penn State, and they said, why don't you come here, go with us, and we'll drive to the game. We'll go see how it goes. And we went to the Akron game, which is, not a big game at all, but I'd never been to a college football game apart from the Carrier Dome.
Sure.
And I'd certainly never seen a 100,000 people stadium, and I'd never seen a band like the Blue Band. So I got all that full experience. We're tailgating in the cow fields, which we all know and love. Someone was deep frying a turkey. All of that was just, I got the full Penn State football experience from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that was just really what sold me on, this is a special place. This is a really cool place. I want to be here. I want to be a part of that. And I really want to be on that field too, just to kind of see the crowd interacting. I think it was the home opener. So there was a lot of excitement whenever you have a home opener. That was definitely a great thing that I did, because honestly, I don't know if it would have changed my choice at all. If I hadn't gone to that game, maybe I would have picked Cornell or something, and wouldn't have had all those cool opportunities, not just to be in the band, but to kind of travel all around with them through the years that I was there.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Carrier Dome, where it's 20 degrees outside and 90 degrees inside.
That's true. Yeah, it's sweltering. Mm-hmm.
Sweltering. I haven't been there for football. I've only been there for a basketball game, but it's uncanny. It's called the Carrier. Well, it's not the Carrier Dome anymore, I don't think, but it didn't have air conditioning at the time.
I know. I think they might have only recently upgraded to being a modern facility, but there was a game. I think the last time we played there was when I was in school in 2008, and it was one of those September days. It was probably 75 outside, but like you said, it was like 90 in there.
Yeah.
Man, tough to take.
Now, when you came to Penn State, right, obviously meteorology was the predetermined major, but did you know which direction you wanted to go? Did you know you wanted to be on television, or did you want to do like meteorology in the corporate sense, like they do at AccuWeather? What was your path at that point?
Yeah, I was pretty dead set on wanting to do the TV side or the communication side. Growing up, especially, things are a lot different now than they were even 10 years ago, especially 20 years ago. But back then, no one had a phone to watch the weather, no one to get the weather info. You really needed to turn on the TV to get that sort of information. So for me, that was kind of my exposure to weather and weather forecasting. And like I said, I was a really big geek about it. I always wanted to know what was going on. So I'd watch the Weather Channel and let my mom know what the weather was going to be. I don't know if she cared, but we would watch that together. And then certainly my local meteorologists, I thought were kind of my influence, right? So up in Syracuse, which is just, the heart of snow country. My hometown got like 100 to 200 inches of snow a year. We would just watch the weather all the time. And I thought it was cool how not only were they informing you of what the weather was going to be, but they really were kind of educating you about it. So to me, that was a big influence. And I was able to meet up with one or two of them at the studio, just as like a courtesy of, they gave me a station tour. And so I kind of wanted to be like them, right? That's kind of where I wanted to go. And for that specific purpose, Penn State really has the most opportunities, or at least it did when I was looking around. A lot of these schools, you might go and they have a great meteorology program, and they say, we're going to get you the education and the degree for the science, but if you want to pursue TV, go find an internship or, do that on your own. Penn State, I had my key card would access the weather studio on the 5th floor of the Walker Building. I mean, and we could go there and practice as part of the campus weather service, which I'm not sure if everybody knows, but there's a student-run campus weather service at Penn State, which is a good outlet of local weather information. If you ever want to find it, you just go to campusweatherservice.com. But it's more importantly to me, I think, a good practice and a good, hands-on experience for any student from freshman year to senior year. You can go in there, you're paired up with some upperclassmen, and this is really like out of the classroom hands-on learning where you're just being, on a shift with others, and you're going to go ahead and put together a forecast for the state, and you might do some radio stations, you might put out a video. Nowadays they do like Facebook broadcasts and those type of things. Bottom line, you're just kind of like getting your hands dirty on letting people know what the weather's going to be and how do you communicate these things and how do you present, all of those things that you don't necessarily learn in the classroom right away. You kind of got to get those gen eds out of the way before you get that. But Penn State is really, really great for those hands-on opportunities for meteorology early on. So that was great for me because I got to, just dive in head first.
This is the People of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Tim Buckley. He's the chief meteorologist at WFMY TV in Greensboro, North Carolina. So, Tim, where has your career taken you? I know the life of like local news and weather professionals, it's almost like being in the military where it involves moving around. Talk a little bit about some of the stops that you've had along the way.
Yeah, it's you're right to say it like that. I think a lot of times, we'll joke about it. There's all these little pit stops along the way. I didn't know this is where I wanted to be or where I would end up or if this will be my final stop. I'm not sure about that either, but kind of in the news space or in the TV news space, back when when I was graduating, you would burn these DVDs with like a sample of your work, make some labels for them, and then go to the post office downtown and spend lots of money to shoot them all over the country. So I sent out probably 20 or 30 of these things to Texas and Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi and Montana, and North Carolina was the only one that called me back. So you kind of had to get your foot in the door somewhere. And then, you grow and you learn and you can maybe get other opportunities. But I've actually been in North Carolina for the last 15 years. So I got my first job in a place called Wilmington, North Carolina. I did not know where that was at the time. I had not been there before. I had not been in North Carolina before. And now I haven't left. So I started there. I worked there for about 4 to 5 years, which is a great little community. If you haven't been, beautiful beaches. Everyone knows Myrtle Beach. Wilmington's just up the road by like 90 minutes. And it's kind of Myrtle Beach without all the stuff. So fewer big buildings, fewer golf courses, things like that. But really beautiful beaches and really interesting weather. So for me, it kind of helped me get my feet wet with forecasting, and we had some hurricanes and you get the beach weather and all that kind of stuff. So I was there for about 4 years, didn't really want to leave the beach, but needed a new challenge. And so in the news world, everything is ranked out by TV markets. So people talk about that when they're talking about football, TV ratings and stuff, like we want to get the New York market. So we're going to add Rutgers to the Big Ten, those types of things. And so I came up the road to Greensboro, which again is maybe not a city that a lot of people realize, but we have a big chunk of North Carolina that we cover from the mountains kind of all the way over to the Raleigh area. And it ranks out as being, one of the top 45 TV markets in the country. So there's a lot of people here in North Carolina, and got me more experience here. I started out on the weekends, and then they moved me up to chief meteorologist about 7 years ago. And I've just loved it. I like this area a lot. It's close enough where I can still drive up to my Penn State football games if I have to, or if I want to, a couple times a year. But yeah, this is kind of where I've been. But a lot of my colleagues or classmates, they might bounce around every 2 years, just kind of climbing that ladder. Which to me, I don't want to move that much. So I'm pretty cozy here at the moment.
That's great. And you've experienced kind of a lot of the diversity already in terms of the regions of North Carolina, right? I mean, Wilmington's a hidden gem. I mean, there are people living in Wilmington who will watch this who are going to be upset about how you described it, because now more people are going to want to visit there. But then you also get, into the foothills and up into the mountains towards the area that you're in. And obviously you have the big cities of Raleigh and Charlotte there as well. So it's certainly an interesting state to live in and spend a lot of time in.
It's a really good state, and we'll like to say, we have the beach and the mountains. Other states have the beach and the mountains too.
Right.
Virginia does, but I like to say, in North Carolina, you have really, really good beaches and really, really good mountains. Like both of them are really good. Like if you've not been to the Blue Ridge Parkway before, go. If you have not been to the Outer Banks before, go. Like they're all really, really cool spaces. And we have both of them, which is a nice place to be for sure. But it is a growing place. So, it's getting more crowded, and that's probably going to continue, I guess.
Absolutely. So first of all, let's talk about some terminology. What is the difference between kind of just, what you were doing in Wilmington as a meteorologist and what you were doing early on in Greensboro too? And the difference between that and what a chief meteorologist is?
Yeah. So the main, and I don't know who came up with that term in the first place, but basically just like a team leader. So, if you're at your job, you might be in charge of a team, right? So if you would be the chief meteorologist, traditionally they would be in charge of the evening news, and you're going to see them at nighttime. But more importantly, they're going to just be the team leader and kind of the department head of all things weather. So you might have a team of 3, 4, 5 people at a station, meteorologists, forecasters that work the different shifts, because we do news all the time now, more shows even, it seems, than we used to at odd hours. But yeah, you're gonna be the coordinator for any weather special projects, the coordinator for any weather coverage, any of those things that might come up. You're the guy or the gal, anything like that weather related, you would be in charge of that for sure. So, if we have to do extended tornado warnings or something on TV, we will be the one coordinating ahead of time with our bosses. Hey, we're probably going to have to, cut into the Steelers game. Sorry, let's be prepared for that. And any sort of coordinating coverage falls under your role for sure. Or any special projects, if you want to do a special story on hurricanes or tornadoes or retrospectives on big weather events in the past, you would be in charge. So it's kind of just like a department head, I would say.
And look, I'm not in this industry, right? But from my understanding, and just just as an observer, it seems like the weather, right, and kind of the weather segments of the news is what has been carrying kind of and keeping local news coverage alive, right? I mean, people watch the news every night, primarily, and at least we do in our house, primarily to see what the local weather is going to be, right? We can get news from other sources, but it seems like local weather seems to be driving viewership on in the news media right now, local news media. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been said, and certainly always been known to me that weather is the number one reason that people might watch the news, or why they might turn on the TV to find that, or nowadays to go on the app or the website. People always want to know the local weather, and you can get it on your phone, certainly. But the thing you can get from a meteorologist or a weather expert would be a couple things. You can get the why when it comes to the weather. Your phone is never going to tell you why the weather is happening. So if you're interested in that, you can certainly get that from us. But it also gives more detail into what's actually happening. An app is completely useless when you're in a severe weather situation. A lot of times, if you're in a dangerous weather situation, you really need someone to explain that to you and kind of walk you through that. And so for us, those are really those situations that, we feel we add value and give important info that people really would need to have. And that could come in a couple of ways. Maybe it's, just as simple of, hey, the roads are really going to be bad tomorrow morning because of XYZ. There's slush, there's ice, there's snow, whatever. Communicating those impacts is not really something that is well used in the app space right now. Or maybe it's a live tornado situation, or lightning or thunderstorms, or those types of things are certainly, the number of weather disasters and weather problems is not going down. So we've certainly just seen Hurricane Helene and all these other big problems across the country. That's really, I feel like, when weather is still very relevant in the broadcast space, and really we're calling it a broadcast space in a loose term now, because it's not just on television, it's on streaming. And gosh, we have our own streaming app now that people can download on the Roku TV and get it anytime. And really it doesn't have to be at 6 and 11. It can be anytime you want it. And if you're in Beaver Stadium and there's a lightning delay possible, you can pull it up and watch it there too, if the Wi-Fi works. But
Exactly. Although Wi-Fi greatly improved this year in Beaver Stadium, so shout out to the operations team.
That's right.
Over there. Tim, I think there's, sometimes people don't necessarily realize that it's more than just you standing in front of a camera and delivering the weather, like reading a script that maybe has come from AccuWeather or from the Weather Channel, right? That there's actually a science behind, like, you're a scientist first and foremost, right? So there's a scientist. So take us kind of a little bit into that world and what the day-to-day of a chief meteorologist might look like from both the science and then the TV side.
Sure. Yeah. I kind of explain it to people that there's kind of like three parts of a job of any meteorologist that might be working in TV. You have what I consider the most important part, which is your actual forecasting. And so whether you know it or not, anyone who you're watching on television makes their own forecast, or they should be anyway. Maybe they sometimes have a partnership with AccuWeather or something like that, but a lot of us don't. And so we're just kind of, getting into your shift. The first thing that you would be doing is what I would call getting in touch with the weather. You're going to be, using all your technology and computers to look and see what's going on. Looking at satellite across the country. We use computer models really heavily now, see where the weather systems are, where they're tracking, and then using your local knowledge of the area and the science. There are things that computer models do really well, and there are other things that they don't do very well. So our goal is to use those tools that we have and then improve upon them. So nowadays, these are even terms that people know. This was not the case when I was in school, but nowadays people know the European model or the GFS model. Like, this is crazy to me that's in the public space, but those computer models are weather forecasting tools that we've always used. And our job is to really improve upon them. And so it might say you're going to get 12 inches of snow next Tuesday in State College on the model. Well, we know that's like a blip and a moment in time, and that you really need to watch the trends and take everything as a whole. And so that's kind of our job, is to make that forecast first. And then from that, not just say, okay, here's what the weather's going to be for today, tomorrow, and the next 7 days, but really, what does it matter to people? So not just what the weather is, but what do they need to know? Because you might only get a 2-minute segment or a 3-minute segment in a given newscast. So you really have to pick and choose. It's just like picking what you want to do for a presentation for your job. You have to use the time you have efficiently and decide what's important to people and what you want them to walk away with. So the first part would be making that forecast. And then the second part would be deciding what your presentation is going to be and how you're going to order it out. So we have some very fancy tools that basically amount to a weather PowerPoint is how I would simplify it down. When you see someone on screen, they're probably going to have a clicker, and every time they hit the button, it's going to change the graphic. Well, we have to make those maps, number one. So your second job is to kind of choose what you want to show and then make the things that you do want to show. So if it's dry for 5 days, I'm probably not going to show the radar. But if it's a heat wave, I'm definitely going to show the temperature map. Today where I live, we've had our coldest morning of the year. So we talked all about not just that it was going to be 19 this morning, but hey, what does that really mean? This is the coldest day for us in 9 months. So you haven't felt this in a while. And then I can show you some data for that. Or what do you need to do about it? Well, your pipes probably aren't going to freeze, but you do want to disconnect that hose from the house. So kind of fine tuning that message is the second part of the job. And then the third part is just delivering it. And that's the easiest part, honestly, is the delivering part. The harder parts are figuring out what the weather is going to be and what's important enough to say. And then the third part, you just got to go on TV and talk. And that's actually not that hard. Once you get the hang of it, you just got to talk. And when you watch TV, the weather people are usually the only ones that aren't going up with some sort of typed out script.
Right.
And the reason is because we have to see ourselves. So if you're using a green screen, and not all of us do anymore, we have big TV walls sometimes, but if you're using a green screen, you really need to see yourself on the final product. So I need to know if I'm standing in front of State College or Altoona or Scranton or whatever, or am I blocking it? Am I pointing at the right thing? So instead of a teleprompter, we're looking at ourselves on the map to know how we're demonstrating and how we're pointing things out. And we're just going to talk extemporaneously. So there'll be someone in our ear. We'll wear a little earpiece. And if I have a 3-minute segment, they'll give me cues and they'll say, 1 minute left, 30 seconds left. Tim, shut up. We're done with you. We're going to the next one. So, and a lot of times the weather folks in the weather segments, we're often used as like an accordion for the producers of the show. Because if you're giving a 30-minute window, if one anchor reads a little too long or a reporter story goes a little too long or the sports highlights go a little short, you might be left with, well, shoot, we need to actually condense by 15 seconds or we need to add 30 seconds. They can tell me that and I can just talk longer or talk less. So those are kind of the main things that go into our daily life, is just making the forecast, putting the graphics together, and then delivering it. And that's a normal day. The weird days are when you might have 7 hours of tornadoes or something, or
right.
days of hurricanes.
Well, take us through one of those scenarios, right? When you have extreme weather. Sure. I know, where you are in North Carolina. I mean, hurricanes certainly have an impact in that region. We've watched it on the news to see how Western North Carolina has been impacted. You talked about the summertime when it's tornado season, right? Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about what those severe weather events look like for you.
Yeah, everyone is different, but they, the common thread would be you're on until it's over is kind of the way I would put it. So when we're in a severe weather situation, basically the red light goes on and it doesn't really go off for a while, especially if, say, for example, a tornado. We had a really bad tornado here in Greensboro in 2018. I guess it's been about 6 years now, but it came right through the chunk of the city that our TV station is in. And kind of, our policy and most TV stations' policy, whenever there's a tornado warning, we go on TV. And the reason we do that is these are things that are really quick. They move fast. You don't have warning. If there's a hurricane coming, you might have a warning for 5 days. No one is surprised that a hurricane's coming. But a tornado, you might only get 5 minutes, and that's good, actually. Sometimes it might be less than that. So we really want to get that info out as quickly as possible and then stay with it. So those are the situations where you have to be quick to jump into action. And that's where your planning comes in of like, all right, we know today could be a bad day. We need to have people in place. And then when it goes, you're just on. And so with that Greensboro situation a couple of years ago, we were on, and then that storm was getting closer and closer to our station. And so we were on TV and we were broadcasting, and gosh, I was looking at the path and it looked like it would be within a quarter mile or so of our TV station. And so you have to kind of think on your feet, still deliver the info. But at that point I had to get our folks, we have a crew of directors and camera people and producers and anyone like that, I had to let them know we got to get to our safe spot. So we have like a little hallway that we have a sticker that says this is a tornado safe part of the building. And so we went in there. I still had my mic on and was just talking, but I didn't have any maps anymore. And we kind of rode out the storm in there. It went by us. It didn't destroy our station. And then we went back to the maps for the next 3 hours or so until it was over. So, those situations are pretty stressful and they can be a little hectic, but they're really important because, no one lives or dies knowing if it's going to be partly cloudy or mostly cloudy, right? But if you know a danger is coming toward your house, you can take action. If you don't know and you don't get that message, well, then you're probably not going to do anything about it. So those are the situations where we really we just take it really seriously. And the hurricanes are different, though, like you saw with Helene or anything else. These things play out over days.
Right.
And so those are marathons. And that's when you're really in more of the preparation space. So like the days leading up to it, it's getting the word out. People in North Carolina know what hurricanes are like. That can be a good thing. It can also be a bad thing. It depends. What do we know about hurricanes? Well, we know they usually hit the coast and they're usually really wet and they have a lot of wind. They don't usually cause big problems in the mountains. So, okay, well, with Helene, we all saw what happened to Asheville. We knew actually several days ahead of time that this was going to be really bad for the mountains. Maybe not to the extreme extent that it has been, because this has been the worst storm for them ever. It's hard to really physically imagine that, but we knew the rivers might get to their highest point. And so it's communicating that point to people ahead of time that's really hard, because telling people that the weather might do something they've never seen it do before is extremely difficult if they've lived there their whole lives. And so then you're battling against the preconceived notions. So those situations are really where I think we need more help from communication experts. And, my interests nowadays are still with weather, of course, but they might be shifting a little bit more toward like social science and communication of how do you communicate things more effectively and how do you get people to understand things in a way that might be challenging for them. So like if I'm telling people dangerous weather information, it might not always be received in a way that prompts them to act. So how do you improve that? And I think the way you improve it is more on the communication side than the weather accuracy side.
Right.
We're pretty good nowadays with the weather accuracy side. It's not perfect, but it's getting better. I think the communication is something that needs more improvement than anything else. And that's where we can learn more.
So you have been nominated for your work, 10 regional Emmy nominations. I know, like when we think about the Emmys, right, and we think about, television Emmys, right, we think of, a show will submit, a couple episodes of the show for these nominations, right? Is that how it works in your world? I mean, do you pick kind of what you think the best segments were for the year, and that's what gets recognized? How does that work in the work that you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. They have categories. So like you might have best comedy or best drama or best supporting actress, I guess. I don't know how the Emmys work. Maybe it's like Seinfeld. I don't know. But anyway, with the regional Emmys that we have, it's an industry thing. So they have different categories. It might be, best sports cast, or for news, it might be, best on-site reporting, or best long-form breaking news coverage, or overall best newscast, or, special report, those types of things. For the weather side of things, there would be categories for, best weather segment, best long-form weather special, those type of things. So just for example, like things I've submitted before would be that one I just talked about, where we were with the Greensboro tornado, how we kind of had to huddle in the hallway, but still broadcast. So that would be something that we would clip and say, we were proud of this. Let's get that out there. This year, I'm nominated for a hurricane special that we put together before the season, just kind of telling people, hey, we think this is going to be a bad year. Here's why, X, Y, Z. We used a couple of really cool tools to kind of visualize why the ocean's warmer than it has been, what that might mean for the hurricane activity, what have you. So kind of looking at those categories, feeling where you might fit, and then, clipping it and putting it in there is kind of how that process works.
Excellent. So we talked a little bit about in the opening segment about your time with the Blue Band. Any special memories? Any big games that kind of stand out to you? You're a 2009 grad, so you graduated before the Rose Bowl, or did you get to go to the Rose Bowl?
I was so lucky. The Rose Bowl was my last game, and so the only thing I wasn't lucky about is that we got our butts kicked by USC. Right. But it was amazing. Yeah. So my freshman year was 2005 when we went. That's the We're Back year.
Orange Bowl, right? That
was the Orange Bowl season. That was, the Joe Pa resurgence after those years where it was really a downturn. They came back. I don't know that anybody expected it. And so that was my introduction really to Penn State football. So my biggest memory probably is still that 2005 Ohio State game, which people still talk about, which is that first really big win at Beaver Stadium in years. And I was there. I don't know. This is my fourth or fifth game ever there in the stadium. I'm just like, this is amazing. And what people might not realize as fans that aren't involved in the band side of things, most all of us love football just as much as the regular fans do. Not everybody, but I certainly do, and a lot of my friends did too. And so we're in the tunnel just like freaking out. I remember the first game that I had as a rookie. They tell you, Dr. Bundy at the time would tell us, he's like, we have 330 in the band. We don't need all of you to play. if you are in your first game or second game and you're in the L and you're a little bit off, we're going to notice that from row 88. But if you're not playing all the notes, that's not going to matter. So make sure you're in the right spot. So I remember my first show coming out of the tunnel. I don't know if I played 3-4 notes, but I made sure I was in the right spot, because on Monday he'd be there with the laser pointer showing who had their formations right or wrong in the PSU or the floating lions. But that's stressful, man. I mean, that's a big stadium. It's a big crowd. So you're just trying to kind of keep your emotions in check. And then as you go throughout the years, you kind of figure out how to do it. But it was always exciting. It was just, definitely the highlight of my time there, because we have a lot of pride in the school, and this is a really important thing. And you're adding, you're the soundtrack to Penn State football, basically, and you're adding that excitement. And when the moments are really big, you're part of that too. And I was fortunate to go to some cool places like, Miami for the Orange Bowl or Pasadena for the Rose Bowl. Marching that long parade. You ever been to that parade before? It's like 5.5 miles.
I've been to the parade. I've been to the parade a couple times. I want to ask you about that. I want to ask you about, what is it like to march the turn at the Rose Bowl parade?
That turn is crazy. And I don't know that, again, this is maybe inside baseball, but when you're marching in a parade, you're angling 300 people down a road, and whoever created the Rose Bowl route just had like a sixth sense of humor, because right at the judging stand, you have a road that does more than a 90-degree turn. I think it's like a 100-degree or 110-degree turn. It's just like sadistic for organizing a very nice march for the band. It's really hard to do with straight lines. And so, gosh, they had us practice that so many times. And it's hard to see because, we're just a bunch of Pennsylvania Northeast kids. We've never been to the Rose Parade. So they're trying to get us to understand what this turn is like. And you don't really realize what it's like until you're there. And that's where the biggest bleachers are and the most people are watching you. And they always have it on TV, that chunk of the parade. So that's a hard turn to do. You're exactly right.
It's funny. Greg Drain has come up with a drill that I think has perfected the turn.
Mhm.
that they used last time. But you'll see some of the bands that are in the parade. There'll be someone on the inside taking baby steps, and the
Yeah.
people on the outside are like sprinting, right, to keep the line straight. So it's
Yes.
certainly probably the most stressful moment of the parade.
It's like a swinging door, right? Like
Yes.
if you swing your door at your house, the part on the hinge doesn't move that much, but the part on the outside moves a lot. And so that's the same way when you're doing a marching band turn. But that's a really long day. I remember we're like, you get out there and you line up at like 5, you sit on a bus for a couple hours at 5 a.m. on some highway. And then you do 5 miles of a parade, and then you go to a football game, the Rose Bowl. And yeah, it's a lot of playing, but it's a lot of fun. I was really fortunate to go to those games for sure. And went to the Rose Bowl a couple years ago as a fan, and that was fun too because we actually won. That was really cool.
Exactly. This is the People of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Tim Buckley. He's the chief meteorologist at WFMY TV in Greensboro, North Carolina. Tim, at the end of each program, we like to have a little bit of fun. We call it the lightning round, and we always call it the lightning round, whether we have a meteorologist on the program or not. So,
okay.
Yeah, so it's always the lightning round. But how about throw you some quick hitters? What was your favorite class at Penn State?
Favorite class? I love this class that we had called Map Analysis. What is that? That means I get to have colored pencils and make weather maps, which sounds so easy, but it was actually one of the hardest classes I had. My professor, Bill Surratt at the time, he was a stickler. You had to have all the fronts in the right spots. But he was just great. That was my favorite one for sure.
Now, before we came on, we were talking about one of my favorite places in Greensboro, Stamey's, which is a classic barbecue joint.
Mm-hmm.
If you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why? And where would you take them in Greensboro for dinner?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. There are so many people that you could choose from, whether sports or new. Maybe no one said this on your lightning round before. I would pick John Williams, who is
nice.
The great composer.
Sure,
I'm a huge music geek, and I just think he's. I hope even decades from now or 100 years from now, I hope he's up there with, like the Mozarts and the Bachs and everything, because I really think he's given so much to music, and I'm just fascinated by how he can seemingly turn any movie into one that's in your heads forever. So I could listen to him talk forever. I could listen to him, his orchestras conduct. I would love to pick his brain over a couple of hours. If we're in Greensboro, maybe we might go to Stamey's. Okay. Barbecue is a good choice. There's a new place called Black Powder Smokehouse that does a really good job too. But North Carolina barbecue, it's pretty good.
Yeah, Natty Green's is a good spot too.
Yeah, it is. And more breweries popping up all the time down here. It's amazing what they're
absolutely doing. You're right about John Williams, though. I mean, he is a living legend, right? Jurassic Park, Star Wars. It's just unbelievable, the scores.
So many that you don't even realize. Like I was saying to someone this summer when the Olympics are on, I was like, that's John Williams too, right? It's amazing.
Exactly. If you could forecast weather for any location or any time period in history, where and when would it be?
Wow. That's a great question. Well, this doesn't answer the question, but the most famous example of important weather forecasting I can think of is the D-Day invasion weather forecast, which was critical to getting them there in a covert way to a degree. Like there was fog. They didn't want too much, but there was just enough to help them out. Weather for any. Let's say I want to forecast the weather for the Beaver Stadium home playoff game this year. That's what I want to do.
There we go. Well, depending on who we play, maybe lots of snow would be helpful.
Hopefully we have the bye instead and we're number one.
Exactly. What's your most unusual we are moment? Maybe a place where unexpectedly someone recognized you as a Penn Stater, or you saw a Penn Stater and you shouted out "We are," that caught someone by surprise?
I was on top of Mount Pilatus in Switzerland, which is near Lucerne. And I was right there up at the top, and I didn't have my gear on, which is on me, but
Right.
someone else did, and I weR'd them, and they give you one of these. Oh yeah, we are. The response, we need to work on that, I think, as Penn Staters. It's always good on campus, but you kind of need to really give it a good response sometimes. But it can catch you off guard.
It is funny. We do joke around for how often we might yell "we are" to someone, where the response is "we are."
You gotta say Penn State, yeah.
Yes, exactly. How about your favorite Penn State sport?
My favorite Penn State sport is football. I spend a lot of money on football every year, going to different games, and I love it. I have traditions with a couple, classmates of mine where we go to home games. I probably go to 2 home games a year just because of my distance, but we always pick one away game a year to go to, and I love that. It's cool to meet Penn Staters at Happy Valley, but I always think it's really fun to meet them elsewhere, because when you see if let's say you're going to Washington next year in Seattle, if you run into the Penn Staters at a bar in Seattle, you're going to become friends with them probably. If you see Penn Staters downtown, at a home game, we're all there, and that's cool too. But I really like bonding with the people elsewhere. So I would have to pick football. If I didn't pick that, I would have to say women's volleyball. I love women's volleyball at Rec Hall. Is so fun.
Absolutely. And your favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
Peanut butter swirl.
Peanut butter swirl. Excellent. Well, Tim, we want to thank you for joining us on the People of Penn State. It's when Penn Staters like you allow us to share your story that elevates the pride and the value of all the Penn State degrees out there, and we're truly grateful for that.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been a pleasure and an honor to be a part of.
Also want to give a big shout out to our producer, Vincent Longaro, our guest relations coordinator, Abby Clark, for making this episode possible. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope that you'll subscribe for the People of Penn State podcast in your favorite podcast app of choice. And while you're there, go ahead and give us a review, drop us a rating. It helps other people find these great stories. If you're a member of the Penn State Alumni Association, thank you for your support. And if you're not yet a member, what are you waiting for? Go to our website at alumni.psu.edu, and you too could become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thanks for listening and for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are